And if you want to be notified the next time we put up a video, just hit that little bell icon next to subscribe. And if you want to be notified the next time we post a video up, just hit that little bell icon. See you next time. Right, it's 10:43 in the morning, and I started doing this tutorial for Studio Strings at 3:15. I can't tell you how difficult these things are to do. I don't know, maybe Paul finds them easy, but it is like kind of doing patting and stroking whilst tying a bow to a lamb whilst on a tightrope. Basically, the situation is, what I'm trying to do is represent a library well, so you've got to play stuff correctly. You've got to use a library that you've not really used much in a kind of way that feels like an authority, whilst also showing it in its best light. You need to tape what's on this screen here. You need to tape what's going through this microphone here. I need to get the sound that's coming out of this computer into there. And then I need to use 3 cameras and make sure they're all recording, they're all focused, and it's lit properly. And as you know from my vlog, I'm no cameraman. So they're actually incredibly stressful, adrenaline fueled things. And I've learnt the hard way to hang my shirt up so that when I'm editing, I do a full edit before kind of getting the shirt on and getting it covered in red wine or something, because there's always going to be pickups, this, that and the other. Anyway, I thought I'd just grab this opportunity to take you through the process of writing this trailer. I've done an in-depth thing about how I've applied Studio Strings to the trailer, but I want to talk to you specifically about, I guess, why I think writing to picture is still a very necessary craft form. Now, usually I work on this total munter of a screen. Admittedly, I don't use the whole screen because I can't see the whole screen. So what I tend to do, exit full screen, work with it in a smaller size. But what I do get up here is when I'm working with Pro Tools, I'll have the Pro Tools faders up there. You'll notice I've now got 2 screens. This aspect ratio of the iMac, it just doesn't contain enough real estate. So I shove the mixer over there or other bits and bobs that I may need if I'm looking at a score or this, that and the other. And then this, it's basically my backup spare MacBook Pro is just this dedicated stuff that I run the audio into via ADAT light pipe and obviously what's coming through this lovely microphone. In order to show you how I work to picture, I'm going to actually get rid of this from the munter screen and switch that telly off. The other thing I have to do is tidy a third of my studio, so everything kind of from this point on looks really tidy, but actually it's filthy dirty. And yes, right, you can go off. Yes, always work barefoot, where I can use the sustain pedal in a nuanced and subtle way. The other thing that's really annoying about this new microphone setup is I'm pretending to see the screen, but I can see roughly 10% of it. So literally this bit here, like these 2 corners, I can see that, but what's in the middle? Can't see it at all. So I'm going to have a think about that. Okay, so basically what's happened on Studio Strings is I didn't have a copy of it to create a demo, and I needed to create a demo really, really early because we wanted the band to play something and for me to replace it with the kind of sampled version. So I was basically in the New Forest and I only had ALBION 1 on me. So I did a demo for Joaquin, who's the conductor in this film, and also he did the orchestration for it, which you'll never hear. Basically, the objective of this film is to talk about the fact that we're starting a new chapter. It's really exciting, new beginning, and I didn't want to create a demo that put people off. I find that often, whilst I love Andy Blaney's amazing virtuosic demos, I think it's also really good to have a balance of stuff that people go, that sounds great, and I reckon I could write something like that. I think that that's really important not to alienate. So I wanted to do something daringly simple. So they went away, shot this film with a great band, and Joaquin was doing a great job, or Kim as he likes to be called, doing a great job conducting. But also what was really exciting about it is we had a motion control camera. So basically just to really kind of pin down the fact that this is all about the space around the musicians, we're able to do these lovely camera moves with members of the different orchestras, woodwinds, brass and strings, disappearing and appearing. So basically what's happened is I've got this cut back and it's been cut to the demo that I sent, and this is when I get really excited. This is when I think the craft of writing to picture comes into its own, and you'll hear the piece that I composed is bollocks, and that is because for 20 years I have been writing to picture, and if I don't have picture I find it really, really difficult. Also, I was in the middle of the New Forest at the time, so I'm going to run the picture. You may have seen the trailer already. I'm going to run the picture with the original demo. Sample, yeah, work in progress, whatever. I know, it's shit and very one-dimensional. And this is where writing to picture comes into kind of has its strength. I find most music, library music, even tracks that you put against picture, it's unidirectional. It's one emotion, one gear. And what we can do when writing to picture is look for the turning points and adjust the music accordingly. So when I look back at this, it was like, well, this isn't working. It's too simple. It's not going to represent the library. I know that this is Albion 1, but I just can tell it's people just going to go, what the fuck's that? And so I tried to find a point in the film which I could really kind of hang my hat on, something to really start with. And for me, it's actually this point coming up here. There is a prime example of where there should be a gear change. My track has already ended, and what they have done is gifted me the thing that I'm going to hang my hat on, and that is going to be a pair of really cool chords. What's also great about doing it this way around is I can observe the camera moves, and for me, this one here is great. It's ascending. Ascending is great for kind of a trailer because it gives us sense that we're going somewhere. The only thing I do like about this music is the sense of major minor ambiguity. I think too majory and it's just cheesy, and I don't think would appeal to a lot of the people who would be buying this, but too minor and it suddenly becomes a little bit. So basically, I went on and did pretty much a complete screen wipe. You'll hear that I kept one of the motifs, so I didn't have to go to a complete blank screen. So let's load up next incarnation of this demo. So basically, this is the demo that I saved last night, and this is where I find that my kind of working day really works for me. I don't think you should ever deliver a master at the end of a day's work. I think you always need to sleep on it. So my routine is knocked off at 5:30 to give my children their dinner, and then we all took the dog for a walk and went for a pint. Now, what I like about going to the pub with my children is it means I can't use my phone because they demand that they play Roblox on my phone. So it gives me an hour to just contemplate them for the fact that I'm a terrible father. Now, contemplate what I had done that day, and it's an hour away from the music, and then when I get back, they have a shower, and whilst they're in the shower, I get to play this through my big Harbath monitors in my living room, and immediately I come up with a list of at least 8 changes that I need to make. I then sleep on it, got up at 3 this morning, just basically literally made a list and literally struck through that list of all the different things I wanted to do. It's like, I love it at that point because it's not about being a cloaky composer. It's just nuts and bolts. It's like, I don't know if you've ever had decorators redecorate your house. It's what they call snagging. So that's what I did this morning. I just basically attended to my snag list and then dived right in to the tutorial. Basically, the thing I'm stuck with is the tempo. There's nothing I can do about that. They're on screen. It's all synchronized to the piece that I wrote, and the kind of that regular rhythm is quite clear. Now, what I'm really pleased about is the cellos aren't that visible. So what I wanted to do is I found that demo originally to be very, very slow. So I wanted to add some kind of 16th counterpoints. And because we're really lingering more on the left-hand side of the band, you don't see the fact that the cellos are not playing this kind of counterpoint rhythm. So let's just have a listen to where I got to with the rhythm section, if you will. So I'm going to move on to something else momentarily. So just get this down for you. There you go. So still a major minor ambiguity, but we're not really matching any of these camera moves. We don't have that last chord. And I thought, well, I think that we need to get some sustained notes in, maybe a semblance of a top line using legatos. And I thought, well, it's very difficult because everyone on screen is just playing staccatos. And then I remembered that with this kind of sized band in this kind of room, what I tend to do is actually record two sessions, one where they're playing all the short notes and ostinatos and stuff like that, the accompaniment, and one where it's the long notes and the kind of the lead lines. And I thought, well, that is not a contrivance. That is a real world use of a band like this. So I set about writing some long notes and a melody, which I detailed in my in-depth on the main channel linked below. But the most important aspect of this is that wonderful chord at the end. Which, for me, one of the real strengths of this library is the basses, because in the hall, the basses are incredibly undefined, which is why often just like a pair of basses in the hall, you're absolutely fine. Here, you actually hear the rosin stuff. Anyway, this isn't a sales channel. I'm not going to do it, but it's something that I'm excited about. Let's put those two together, and this will take us to where I ended up last night, and I'm going to talk you through the notes that I made to myself last night and this morning when I looked at it. So let's have a listen to where I ended up, which, again, if the deadline was the end of the day, I would have sent this, I would have been happy, but I would have looked at it later that night and gone, oh, if only I did, and if only I did that. So let me just run it down as I left it last night. A lot better. Okay, so let's pull up where we ended up this morning, and I'll just take you through bit by bit the changes I made. That took maybe 1 or 2 hours to do, and then the snagging today took 1 or 2 hours to do, just to get that little 1% extra across the finish line, where just those little finesses that just make it that little bit more special. Okay, so here we go. Let's drag that down again. That's a very black. What's that all about? Bizarre. Okay, right. So, as you can tell, I'm actually losing my voice. I've been speaking so long today. Right. So there's a little bit of colour coding there for me, just as an aide-memoire for the video. But basically, if we just go through, the first thing I did was just simply drop this metronomic thing. I would have liked it to be a little bit more kind of less metered, but I was stuck to the picture. So I had this opportunity before they faded the band in to drop a couple of the hits there, so that when the kind of melody enters, there's a hole for it. What I also decided to do also was to, as I mentioned on the tutorial, was the first two I used more of a brushed, softer sound. So let's have a look at that. Becomes a little bit more kind of QA, a little bit more interaction there, which I enjoyed. Next up, I won't bore you with all of the kind of little nuanced stuff, but I did a little bit of tightening. I tend not to quantize stuff too much. He says clicking off, so you can't see the quantize. To an 1/8, there are a few changes I made to the legato notes. And then the next big thing I did was I noticed that on the last night's film, this pluck here is actually off time. Now, the temptation for me is to contact the editor and go, listen, can you actually just move that film, the in point of the film, move it further up the timeline so he doesn't come late on the pizzicato. But this is the beauty of writing music to picture. So what I simply did was I noted at bar 20 this time code of 3405, which is what it was with just this flat tempo of 100. So I created a tempo event at 20. I then went in at bar 13 and changed the tempo down to 99, which is, it's so small you don't notice. It's not a sudden change. So it went down to 99 so that we hit that pluck by the time we get to 16. So basically, down to 99, we make enough time up by the time the pluck happens there that's now in time-ish. And then what I need to do is by the time we're back at 20, because there's some things that we hit, I need to get back to that time code. So simply what I did is I went to this thing called tempo operations, and I created two small ramps, one that takes us all the way up to nearly 103 and then one that takes us back down to the original tempo of 100. Again, you don't really notice it, but it just tightens up the imagery to the picture. So let's have a look at that. Bang on. I still 20 years and I still love, I mean, this has been really fun to kind of score an orchestra playing a piece of music that they're not playing. Enjoyed every minute of it. Okay, what else did I do? Let's move through. Yeah, just two more things that I want to talk about. Basically, I added in, if you remember the last one, that last chord sounded great, but basically what I felt was we had all of these lovely legatos, and legatos on this stuff really easy to use. So I thought what I'd do is add in the violin and the cello. And what I find is if you want the whole band to sound like they're legatoing, they're portamentoing, you really only need the top and the bottom and the ear. It's not that sophisticated to go, hang on, well, unless you're Ben Valfish, because he's kind of got the most amazing ears of any man I've ever met. But, if you're not listening out for it, you don't notice it's not the whole band. And I quite like it because it doesn't sound like a kind of Arabian slide, the whole band going. It's just these two bits. So let's just have a listen to these. And you'll just see, actually, if I just go in here, you'll see I really dug the transition out. So that's expression, and particularly with the cello. Just really emphasise that. So when you listen to it in isolation, it probably sounds actually a bit clumsy. That does actually sound like a fade, but in the context of all the people playing, which I liked. I also just put a bit of trem there. I just find that these are kind of quite subliminally put a bit of angst in, and I used a sulpont trem. And then finally, I put a little bit of a mastering chain in. I went light here. I think I feel very strongly about things being over-mastered for demos, because I think there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors there. I think that you can add in a sonic quality that isn't in the sample libraries. I'm basically mastering for the track. So the first thing I did was just I boost the bottom end a little bit because I'm a bass head, and I always like that. I would consider that to be hyping. That's not me, I hope, drawing the wool over your eyes. I just like stuff a bit bassier than is natural. I've rolled a tiny bit of the top off. This library is, the room is incredibly bright, but what's brilliant about Simon is he's managed to create a very warm sounding library, but with these really high cluster chords. It just pushes it just over the edge for me, and I just literally draw it back with that. And then we've got our compressor, just knocking back the very last peak, really. So if we have a listen to that, and then the L3 Ultra Maximizer, which just makes it louder. And just the last thing I did, which again I mentioned in the tutorial, is I thought, well, if we've got this repeating note, wouldn't it be nice if actually one section played each note, and then for the last kind of motif, the whole section played it. So you had this spectral thing, and also because the cellos were kind of playing it, it's unnaturally high, and when the tuning is irregular, when people are playing unnaturally high, they call it reach. I actually like that sound, but I think for a launch trailer, I think that, I don't know, we're asking for trouble, particularly from VI Control. So I just did that with that thing where each of them play a bit. Which I enjoyed. There was a lot more kind of fine fiddling around, really getting the absolute, things like the way that certain accents felt, just really balancing the better. Yeah, I can't sing. And lots of kind of fine tuning like that. But I just think, in kind of conclusion, creating a piece of music blind, which was admittedly shit, is nowhere near as good as writing it to picture. And I'm just watching back what I've just kind of jammed in with the rhythmic accompaniments, and I'm actually following what the players are doing, what they're leaning into, this, that, and the other. So it's become a totally collaborative process. And I think it's examples like this provide, I think, an important case for writing music to picture. It's not something you could have knitted together from a library. It's not something that you could have just got off the shelf. And I think the point that gear change happens is when, I hope, you feel this is a classy bit of shit. I don't know. I'm seriously not classy, the amount I swear. So what I thought I'd do is actually just run both versions down back to back so that you can compare the difference. And it's not about what it sounds like, what I've done specifically, it's how it makes you feel. Thanks as always for watching. Second time I've said this today. If you haven't subscribed, please hit subscribe, hit like if you like what I do, and remember that little bell button is for notifications if you want to know the moment I put a new video up. Right, I'm off for a honey drink, and I will probably have something a little bit stronger tonight. See you next time.